The third process of the Align, Plan and Organize domain, called Manage Enterprise Architecture, has 5 practices. The second practice is to define a reference architecture. From a RACI charts perspective, the entities that are responsible for this practice include the Chief Information Officer, the Head Architect, and the business executives. The entity that is held accountable is the Architecture Board. The practice receives several inputs that include the operational guidelines and organizational structures from the APO01 process, the data classification guidelines from the APO01 process, and the enterprise strategy from external sources. It generates several outputs, which are the architecture definition to be used by several other processes, the process architecture model to be used by the APO01 process, and the information architecture model to be used by the DSS5 and BAI2 and 3 processes. The activities to be performed in this practice include maintaining a repository of standards, modeling artifacts, and reusable components. Specific parts of the repository should be selected, addressing the stakeholder requirements to be fulfilled by the architecture. The baseline architecture domain should be defined, along with the scope of the needed changes to reach the target architecture. An information architecture model should be maintained, and the roles and responsibilities to be involved should be defined. The architecture model should be reviewed and verified that it ensures the consistency required to reach the target architecture. The architecture models, including the business, information, and technology domains, should be finalized, and an architecture definition document should be created. The third practice is to select the architecture opportunities and solutions. From a RACI charts perspective, the entities that are responsible for this practice include the Strategic Executive Committee, the Chief Information Officer, and the Head Architect. The entity that is held accountable is the Chief Executive Officer. The practice receives 2 inputs, which are the architecture changes from the APO02 process, and the enterprise strategies from external sources. It generates 2 outputs, which are the high-level migration plan and the transition architectures, to be used by the APO02 process. The activities involved in this practice include determining the enterprise change culture and readiness, and identifying the enterprise drivers. The gap between the current and target architectures should be analyzed, and the potential solutions to be implemented should be assessed. The enterprise's acceptance of the assessed risks should be obtained, and a high-level implementation plan and migration strategy should be developed. The major work packages to be included in this strategy should be identified and grouped into programs and projects.